Jonas wished he'd added a request for a personality to the list, and maybe a few other points about strength of character, thinking of the Fey chit who'd burst into tears during their first meeting last week. She was so intimidated by him and his reputation as a trickster, she couldn't meet his eyes. When he spoke, she fell to pieces. The term trickster often referred to a Fey with the ability to magically change their form into that of a beast, but Jonas was no mage. He was a different sort of trickster, the kind heralded by warnings and whispers. Jonas leaned out to peer again at the mirror. It captured the witch's reflection, resting in a floral armchair. Her expression was cold and determined, not one bit intimidated or near tears. An unflattering knit shawl draped her arms. She pulled it up over her shoulders as he watched. The shawl, a thing he'd expect to find on a mourning woman at a funeral, was bulky and served to hide all the parts of her he'd rather look upon. The Lady of Whitehome was half human and half Fey. No horns or tail. Her ears came to subtle points surrounded by ringlets of rich raven hair, all pinned up tight in the high fashion. A loose curl framing her face. Her skin was a rosy shade of pink not found amongst mortals. He thought of the other candidates he'd met that week. Her lush form was unfortunately uncommon amongst Fey kind. Jonas didn't want to share a bed with a bony little waif like the matchmaker. Fey were more often than not thin and angular, all sharp edges. Lady Frances had curves. She was soft all over, and his blood fired at the thought. Though he didn't look forward to being on the receiving end of her barbed tongue yet again. He was willing to admit that their previous encounters had, at the very least, never been dull. Curiosity burning through him, he resigned himself. I'll meet with her. But alone. It's a human custom that an unmarried woman be properly chaperoned, the matchmaker whispered. I should sit in. The lady abides by... Alone, he insisted. He had no patience for such customs. There were more humans and half-humans in River Row than Fey, but that didn't mean he'd be bending over backwards for their oversensitive sensibilities. They should be glad he'd employed a matchmaker instead of doing things the old-fashioned Fey way, selecting his bride on instinct and hauling her off over his shoulder. His eyes met with the witch's in the mirror, as though she had heard his thoughts. Her gaze was a rich hazel flecked in browns and greens, like a ripe forest floor. There, in the depths of those jewelled earth tones, he found his own curiosity reflected at him, alongside an unmistakable challenge. One of her gracefully manicured brows lifted. He crooked a finger at her, and her nose wrinkled, resistance already brewing between them. A thoughtless gesture was not the way to summon a lady. If she hoped he had plans to treat her with the stodgy manners of one of her peers, she was mistaken. He was the son of a grocer. The handful of silly social human rules he knew he had no intention of abiding by. Not today. What fun would that be? Grinning, he moved deeper into the dining room to wait on her. The matchmaker sent him a warning glance, then made herself scarce. Several long moments passed with no sign of the witch. Jonas checked the gilded timepiece attached to the pocket of his waistcoat, shuffling his feet. Perhaps the lady had come to her senses and had decided not to play his game. The thought disappointed him more than he'd ever admit aloud. Frustrated, he scraped his boot at a corner of ornate rug where the threads had begun to fray. Finally, gentle footsteps approached. She was still here. My, she must be desperate indeed. Jonas moved to the head of the table, resting his hand on the back of one of the chairs. Anticipation caused his pulse to jump. The dining area was furnished with smaller, more intimate place settings, and too many bouquets of bright, strong-smelling flowers. The witch moved gracefully into the room, somehow not hampered by the size of